Okay, so the next thing I'd like to talk about after the basics is Emmet. So some of you may be familiar with Emmet. I've talked about in some of my other courses. It's an extension that actually comes for free out of the box with VS Code. So in Sublime Text, you have to install it on your own. But to be clear, it is a separate tool. So it has separate documentation, as you can see here. If you go to the VS Code docs and you search for Emmet, it says, Emmet support is built right into VS Code, no extension required. But if you want to learn more about it, I recommend you go to the Emmet documentation. As far as what it actually does, I haven't said that yet. It helps you write code, HTML markup very quickly. You type some short little couple characters, you hit tab, and it expands it into something much larger. So there's a lot of syntax, and I'm not gonna use very much of it in the course. There's just a couple things I'll point out. But if you want to be an expert about it, I know some developers who memorize all of the tools, and you can write some really incredible stuff very easily. For example, if we go here, you could generate all of this code with this one line. So let's dive into how it works. Over here, what I'm going to do is open up a folder. You can also just make a new file, but make an HTML file. So I have two HTML files here. Right, where are you? Right here. Okay, so I've got this file. Either one will work. And the first thing, if you just type an exclamation point, you'll see that I get this autocomplete hint, Emmet abbreviation. If you click here, it will tell you what it thinks that you want. This one, I don't know why they chose an exclamation point. It's just a standard way of starting your document. Well, actually, that's a dumb thing for me to say. I do know why, because you put the exclamation point right there in front of doc type. So I take that back. But you type exclamation point and hit tab. It's important to note, though, if you hit space, for example, and try and hit tab, it's not going to work. If you just go back, I hit space and then I hit delete and I hit tab, it doesn't work either. You have to have just typed exclamation point tab, and it creates all of this for me. So this is something you'll do once per document, but let's say that I need to create an H1. Well, this is easy. You just type H1 and you can see the abbreviation. You hit tab and it creates that for you. But a couple of other things. You can do an H1 with a class of header. To do that, it's dot header or dot whatever. And you hit tab, and it gives you class equal header. So since Bootstrap relies so much on classes that we add to our elements, you'll see me do this all the time. You might see something like this, button with the class of BTN, with another class of BTN large, and finally another class of BTN-primary, for example. And then I'll hit tab, and it's just shorter than having to type class equals, trying to fumble around, find the quotation marks. Maybe that's a bit dramatic, but it just is easier. Another thing, just so you're aware, the default type of element that Emmet creates is a div. So if you don't, for example, if I want to make a div with the ID of hi, I can do, or with the class of hi, I can do this. Or I can leave off the div and just do dot hi. And it assumes I want a div. So in the course, you'll see me do things like this, dot row. That's a Bootstrap class, or dot call instead of typing div. So it's just a shortened syntax. Another useful thing, let's say make a paragraph with an ID of, special. So I use the hash sign, and then a class of lead. I can do both of those. And I could fill it with placeholder text by typing lorem, and then let's say I want 20 words of lorem ipsum. I hit tab, and it gives me 20 words. So you might see me do that as well. There's a lot more to Emmet. You can do H1 with the class of heading times 30, and it will make 30 of them for you. If you go back to the docs, there's a lot more that you can play with. You can nest elements. So for example, if I do this, get rid of that, div greater than ul greater than li. Let's do one more. Inside the li, let's do an anchor tag. This is what it makes me. A div with a ul nested inside with an li and an a tag inside of that. There's other things, but I'm probably not going to use any of these in the course. We're not doing any crazy markup, but just so you are aware, there's a lot more that you can do. It's really powerful. But that's all I'll leave it at for now. Classes and IDs using dot, so h1 dot something, dot class name, and then octothorpe hash sign is to give something an ID. And that's pretty much all that we'll be using, as well as the lorem ipsum generator. Okay, so that is Emmet. It's really nice. It comes for free in VS Code. You don't have to do any fancy installations. And I highly recommend, if you have the time and you're not familiar with it, get good at it, because there's a lot to it and it can really speed up your writing of HTML. Okay, next I'm going to talk about Live Server, which is another extension that we do need to install manually, and it will really help us out in the course.